All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ms. Ford, will you call the roll, please?
Chairman Wingate.
Here.
Vice Chairman McClendon.
Here.
Mrs. Hill. Here. Mrs. Jones. Here. Mr. Perez.
Here.
Mrs. Robinson. Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Thurman. Here. Mr. Walker.
Here.
All right, first order of business here. One, I'd like to welcome our newest school board member, Mr. Walker. Good to have you. Congratulations on your appointment, and
Thank you.
look forward to working with you.
Appreciate that.
Joe Smith
Yes, ma'am.
was feeding for some boxing gloves earlier, just so you know.
He's got a spot you can go train to. All right, so we got a couple items of business here tonight that we'd like to address. The first would be the approval of the interim's contract. It is an action item, so I will ask for a motion and then a second, and if we get those two, then we can discuss.
Move
So
to
moved.
approve.
Second.
So you get those with
Who
Mrs.
was the
Ford.
second?
Mr. Perez.
Okay.
All right, also, we have updated a little bit. We're no longer using the solo cup since we don't have, still don't have lights on our microphones, but we do have a light there in front, so if you would like to ask a question, have some comment, just hit your light there, and I'll try to keep up with that like I typically do, and we will go from there, okay? All right, so on this item here, any questions or discussions around the contract of the interim? Got Mr. Smith and then Ms. Thurman.
I'm just curious, and maybe we talked about this and it just went over my head and I missed it. But the adjunct professor work at Vanderbilt, I'd be interested in knowing how often that happens and when that happens, and does that mean our superintendent will be out of the district during those times? And we may have talked about it and I missed it, but so if I missed it, I apologize, but I would like to know how and when and how that occurs.
Dr. Towns, can you answer that, or Mr. Bennett, whoever's discussed that?
Yes, thank you for the question. It is, this is actually going to be my first time. They asked me before Dr. Johnson had submitted his resignation, invited me to be an adjunct at Vanderbilt. So I'm going to be teaching in the doctorate program, the educational doctorate program, the same one I completed. It's 3 weekends this fall. So one weekend in September, Saturday, it's Friday, the class starts Friday after 4 p.m. and it goes all day Saturday. One weekend in October, and then the final weekend is the first week of December.
Okay, so you, on the weekends, obviously you won't be out of the district then?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, well, that was one of my questions. I was wondering how often and all that. So she clarified that. Okay, the travel. I'm just wondering, $4,500 for travel. And I did ask Scott if this money could be used to go back and forth to Nashville, and he said, well, technically, probably yes. I'm not real sure how I feel about that. I don't think the taxpayer should be paying for that. Also, and I just think that's a lot of money for travel, because I wonder where the superintendent travels.
So it's obviously the discretion of the board about how to handle this, but I believe that Dr. Towns already has $4,800 a year in travel allowance built into her current compensation. I can't remember what we did for Dr. Johnson, but I think it was something closer to $800 a month for travel. Basically, the way it works is it's additional compensation that adds onto their TCRS benefit.
So it's added as part of their salary, and it goes toward their retirement.
It's effectively part of the salary for reasons that go back a long time that don't matter tonight. It's treated as a separate item, but it's effectively compensation.
Am I,
Hang on 1 second, Mr.
sorry, my bad. Forgot.
Okay, I'm gonna have to cipher that a minute.
Okay. Mrs. Jones and then Mr. Perez. Okay, Mr. Perez.
I would assume, and I could be wrong, so it would help me. I would assume that there's a mileage reimbursement to
some of our staff who use their own vehicles possibly to go visit schools continuously back and forth. Would that be part of that?
Yes,
Mr. Scott?
I'm trying to figure out how to turn my mic on, and maybe it's on. Can y'all hear me?
It's on.
Yes, so that is customary for chief level within the district, and to your point, Marco, it's for wear and tear of, car instead of reimbursement for mileage, because employees typically traveling for work receive the reimbursements that the state allocates for mileage. But for our levels, due to the amount of travel that we do across the district all the time, it's a set amount so that we don't have to keep track of that and reimburse that every month.
All right.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker?
Since we're discussing a month-to-month contract, could we not put the verbiage in here for the $375 a month versus the whole, not that it would happen, but could be the possibility of $4,500 be used for 2 months. Could be the verbiage that way to have a monthly amount.
Mr. Bennett, you want to?
Sure. So, and let me, I guess, try to reiterate. Right now, Dr. Towns is getting $4,800 a month in travel allowance already. So,
Not a
I'm
month.
sorry, a year. Golly, it's been one of those long days. So she gets $4,800 a year anyway. The reason we're spelling out in this contract is because the boilerplate language that we use is this is what she's paid, and it's exclusive of everything else. But Dr. Towns pointed out she's already getting the $4,800, and when she goes back to her deputy superintendent's position, she kind of hate to lose that. So it's just sort of a tap that this is something that's already allowed to her as an employee. It's the discretion of the board, obviously. The point that I would make is it's $4,800 a year she's already getting. And when she goes back to being the deputy superintendent, it's $4,800 that she would be getting. Whether the board chooses to extend that benefit in addition to the salary bump is, again, the discretion of the board, but she gets the travel allowance now and she'll get it later. I hope I did a good job explaining that, Mr. Chairman.
I understand. Any other questions, discussion around that? Anything else there in the contract? Otherwise, we will have a vote on the interim contract. Okay, I think we're ready, Mrs. Ford.
Mrs. Hill?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. McClendon?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. Robinson? Oh, sorry. Mr. Smith?
Yes,
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
May I abstain, just because this is the first time I saw it, I just would feel more comfortable at that.
No, you got to vote now.
Joe, where's the boxing glove?
Chairman Wingate?
Yes. All right. So that brings us to discussion here of next steps. And you have, I believe, already received today an email from Mr. Bennett around the RFP that was used in 2016. Mrs. Ford was kind enough to print off copies for everyone, so you'd have that to put your hands on and be able to make notes on if you'd like. You should have that also at your table. You can take a moment, obviously, if you haven't already, to kind of look over that. Some items that I would suggest that we think about here are really just kind of timeline. And I know we talked about that before the last time we met, what our desire would be to have when we would like to have our next leader in place. And so, you can see there an anticipated schedule of key dates from the last time. Obviously, we were not able to follow that schedule for many, many reasons, and unfortunate reasons, but that was the anticipated schedule the last time we went to search for a superintendent. So, again, I wanted you all to have this as a frame of reference around what we're about to do and what we're about to embark on, and then hopefully, before we leave here tonight, come to some form of decision around partnership for the search and an idea around when we would like to have those folks, if we choose to partner, have those folks show their interest so that we can begin to move forward as quickly as possible. So, discussion, questions, anything on what you have? Mr. Perez?
So I do want to remind everybody that last time when we discussed this, Ms. Thurman agreed fully with everything I said. I think that's what I remember. Those
Yeah.
are the words that ring in my ears. But as I've been thinking about it, there's a lot of administrative work that has to happen in order to go through a search process. And if we want to do a good job, and I said last time, I don't want to spend a lot of money on a search firm to do this, but the reality is, I don't think we will be able to dedicate the time in the midst of everything else we have to really put that time and energy and effort in, vetting, because I do want the public to feel that we did a very thorough job, that we did our job, that we, again, I was told when I went to my training, we do 3 things. We pick a superintendent, supervise them, we check the budget, and we decide policies, and that first thing, it's gonna take a lot of effort. So I asked Ms. Ford to, because I wasn't here, to let me know the cost. Usually it's about 2.5 times the salary of an individual. So I guess last time it was about $60,000. That sounds high to me, but if we put out an RFP, but I also was thinking it's $60,000 for an individual who will supervise $500 million. I don't think any company in the world would say dedicating so much time and effort to doing it right. So anyway, so to me, after reading through and thinking about it, I would be open to consider having a search firm lead. I still hold my position as to where I hope this individual would come from. But at the same time, I realize there's a lot of detailed administrative tasks required to a solid, good search process that I don't think we have the time to do individually as board members. So, especially if we'd have to do it public altogether every single time, that'd be excruciating. So, anyways, that's me.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, I think that we spend, and I've said this before, we spend a lot of money on professional development, we spend a lot of money on leadership. We have all kinds of companies that give us money to try to grow your own, try to do that, but yet we don't grow our own. And it's always been disturbing to me. No wonder a lot of our educators get real frustrated because for some reason, we think like if you cross every state line you cross, it makes you smarter. It seems like, well, these people are all the way from California. Well, there's crazy people in California too. So I don't understand why we have to go out of Hamilton County to find someone. People know that if a job is open, you post the job and word spreads like wildfire in the education community. Everybody knows when there's a superintendent opening in the education field. They just do. It's not like you have to pay these people to go out and advertise a job. They know it's there. And I too want the public to feel confident that we're doing the right thing. I don't know why having someone in our school system who has been here for years and has worked at almost every level in our system is not enough for people to have confidence in them, more so than interviewing somebody 2 or 3 times on the Zoom. And then too, I have to look at the fact of what superintendent would leave their superintendent job at the first of school? Do we really want that kind of superintendent here? Somebody that's going to just pack up and leave? I mean, it just happened to us, of course, but what kind of person does that? So I'm not real sure that's the kind of person I would be looking for either. I think that we have local candidates here. There's one in particular, of course, that I like, and it's been very well made. Now, I don't know why we want to spend $60,000 or $40,000 or $20,000 or whatever like that to pick someone when we may very well have someone right here that would do the job. And like I say, I don't know that there's any way I could interview anyone that I know any better than I do some of our local candidates and being able to see what they've done and how they've done it and talk to the people who have worked with them and have interaction with them like we all have, some of our people in our administration, why do we think somebody else coming in from out of town cares any more about Hamilton County kids than the people from Hamilton County? And I just don't understand that. Because I remember that I've been through quite a few superintendents since I've been on the board, and they all say the same thing. Oh, we plan on making Hamilton County our home. Oh, we're gonna be here. Oh, we don't plan on going anywhere. And about the time their contract's up, we give them a new contract, then they leave anyway. So, like I say, I'm all about homegrown. I think we have a lot of very smart people here. They know the layout of the county. They know the schools. They know the principals. And I just don't know why we want to waste a lot of money going around looking for another superintendent. I think we have people here, right here in Hamilton County, that would do an excellent job.
Mr. Smith?
A lot of wisdom in what Rhonda just said. I get a little frustrated. I can think recently, not too long ago, Chattanooga Chamber had to do a national search. River City, national search. Most recently, where I spent my career, the Metro YMCA, national search, when all three of them probably had the best people right under their nose. I know the YMCA did. And so what does that say about us? What does that say about Chattanooga? What does that say about us? That we don't train our people well? I don't know. That's kind of what it sounds like to me. And I believe we need to find the best we can find. If that means national, okay, so be it. But I wonder what, I know we pay the TSBA, don't we? Do they not assist with this thing? Well, wouldn't that be since we're already paying them, wouldn't that be a good place to start to see what maybe how they could help us to do some of the administrative stuff that you're referencing there, rather than going out and spending $60,000 and going through that nightmare again. And that's what it was. It was a nightmare. So I just think it says a lot about Chattanooga when we have to do a national search. Does that mean we don't train folks very well here in Chattanooga? I don't know. Thank you.
Mr. Walker?
Yes, sir. We have, 22 years ago when we combined the systems, I think everybody felt there was a need maybe to bring somebody in. I have my opinions about whether that worked or not, but when we had our forum in this room a couple weeks ago for the District 9 seat, we had all 8 candidates that were, fine people representing that area of town, and everyone agreed that we need to look inside. And I just believe that 100%, if someone is going to work their way up to, and every principal that we have may not want to be a superintendent, but I like the idea that they get the opportunity to become that CEO of the company, so to speak, and we definitely have those people in the community. There's, a nationwide search and all those. I think the superintendent is a community position that is an extension of the community, and those are my thoughts.
Mr. McClendon?
I think I'll agree with the sentiment Mr. Smith said about Chattanooga and Hamilton County and how we have the first instinct to go large. One thing that I did like, and I think Mr. Bennett sent it to us earlier, was the suggestion that we maybe start with an internal search and have internal candidates kind of go through a search process. It's quicker, it's fairly cheap. I think it was like $1,500 a candidate or something like that. And then if we find who we're looking for, then we find who we're looking for, and if we don't, then we can expand that search into a larger bucket. But I think one thing I've heard from people in the community and from teachers and principals is consistency. And then I think there is a big morale issue where we keep going in or going out and bringing people into the county. So I really do like the approach of maybe starting internally, going that route. like I said, when we had this first discussion, my two top things are that we do this as quick as possible, as good as possible, and as cheap as possible. And I think that's what that allows us to do, is do internal first, see how many candidates we have, put them through a test, outside test, because we all have relationships with people in the district, and have an outside kind of board or search committee look at them, interview them, and then if we find them, we find them. If we don't, we expand and go that route. I think that just kind of makes sense to start internally first.
Mrs. Hill?
I'm fascinated by our long and short memories in Hamilton County. The last superintendent that I remember having in Hamilton County was Brian Johnson, and he came from Tennessee, and he was really great. And the one that I remember before that was homegrown, and I think our entire community was shocked at how well that did not go. I don't think that your zip code for a student should, determine your trajectory in life, and I don't see that for a superintendent that where you've been before necessarily, physically before, necessarily makes you better or worse for Hamilton County. My goal for our new superintendent is to have a superintendent who, regardless of where they come from, is prepared to help us take our strategic plan to the next level, that sees the goals that we have had, the benchmarks that we hit, the ones that we didn't, and can help us figure out how we're going to get to even a higher level of achievement with our students. And as I reflect on the organizations you all have mentioned, like why do they go out of town, I guess the dot that I see in common is perhaps an organization especially says we want to do a national search when there's something really big and bold that they see as a board that's next in the future for them. And they say, we want to see what's out there for new ideas. And maybe I do think we as a board need to decide what the capabilities, experience, and attributes are that we want in a superintendent, right? And if what we want is a caretaker of our current strategic plan, that will yield one kind of candidate. If what we want is a bold press toward continued achievement, that might yield a different candidate. And we don't know until we put it out there. And I agree with Rhonda 100%. Word travels fast in this industry. So the how we advertise and whether we have a search firm, as I said before, is neither here nor there to me. I think that participating in a rigorous search and a rigorous interview process will strengthen our final superintendent's validity as superintendent. And I want to set our future superintendent up for the best possible start to service. Tucker, you mentioned you want the quickest, best, cheapest search that we can get. And something that my clients have always talked about in manufacturing is a three-legged stool. And you can have it quick, or you can have it quality, or you can have it cheap, but you can't have it all. So you got to be willing to give up one of them. We could have a quick quality search, but it won't be cheap. Or we could have a cheap quality search and it'll take a long time. For me, the one I'm not willing to give up is quality. And I will say, when I looked at the RFP, I was so thankful to see it because it helped me better understand what you all went through last time and previous time to search for a superintendent. And the reality, the things that stood out to me that I felt like would be heavy lifts and need to be done in a highly appropriate way are the survey and conduct focus groups to solicit opinions from board members, senior district staff, elected officials, various district stakeholders, meeting with the board and with individual board members to assess board priorities, goals, and objectives. You know, those are things that, you know, we as a board, if we have a board retreat, we could probably, or a couple more work sessions like this, you know, get it all out on the marker board of here's what we want. You know, I've started my list. Y'all have probably started your list. Then this next one, number 5, develop and implement a plan to provide and facilitate community input and engagement regarding desired superintendent skills, characteristics, and qualifications. Such a plan, which may include focus group surveys, large community meetings, must include all school system stakeholders, including parents and parent organizations, employees, business community, et cetera, key elected officials. That, I do wonder if our internal community engagement staff would be able to facilitate that. They have built such good relationships in the community. I think that our school communities expect to be asked those questions by those. So that I can see, like the first part feels like we could get our house in order. The getting community feedback throughout the process feels like an internal thing. But number 8, I don't know if that's something that we hand to Penny's group, or we hand to Penny's group in HR, or we hand to TSBA. I would be surprised, Joe, if TSBA will do that for free. That feels like a profit center for them, maybe. Scott, do you know, does TSBA charge for? They do charge, so there would be some kind of fee. I sort of felt like $1,500 a candidate with that other guy might add up, but
Yeah.
but no, did that feel that way to you too? But numbers 9, 10, and 11, these were the ones that I had the biggest question mark of where would the resources come from to screen and keep us in the sunshine and help us have a metric for everybody. Screen all applications using criteria to be developed with the board, but provide a summary of all candidates to the board. So I assume you all probably didn't deep dive into, and Joe, as chair, perhaps you can answer this. When you all did the search last time, did you deep dive into a selection of people who applied, or did you deep dive into every person that applied?
Not every person that applied. That
that's
was
what-
the job of the firm.
That's one of the firms they culled.
That was
Okay.
one of their jobs.
Okay. So 9 definitely was done by the firm, which helped make it a manageable process for the board. And then number 10, conducting appropriate background checks and interviews of qualified applicants and including the results. I hadn't even thought about that. I was so thankful for this document. And then coordinate and facilitate the interview process. You know, possibly Sherry could organize all that, but it feels like it would be quite a lot to add to her plate. So as I've said, like, if we hire a firm or not, it's neither here nor there to me, so long as we have a quality search for a tremendous superintendent. And I don't know that I feel like not necessarily a only look local and then expand, but put it out there for everybody at the same time, and you can don't geographically limit it, and let the people bring us their best. And when it comes to, actually, I even started thinking about project-based learning. And, you know, I come from a creative, technical field where we did all kinds of, you know, when I was in publishing, we would have an editor write an article before they came. Like, is there something, do we want to see a superintendent do something, a superintendent candidate? Just a brainstorm there of helping us see better what they bring to our district, because I agree with Rhonda, 3 Zoom interviews is a hard way to get to know somebody. So, thanks, guys.
Mrs. Jones.
As I stated the last time we were here, I'm okay with looking internally, and I'm perfectly fine with looking internally. I'm perfectly fine with looking locally. And, I mean, I've been through the process before with the search firm. They did do a lot of the legwork, so by the time we got the candidates, I feel like it was maybe down to 10 candidates. I think they narrowed it down to 10 or then 5 Yeah, it went 10 to 5, and then we got down to the last, that came in to interview one-on-one with us. So they did take a lot of that extra work that we would have to figure out who within Hamilton County Schools would do that, and what would that look like? Because some of our employees are not salaried, so we have to pay them overtime to do certain things, so forth and so on. So you have to look into that, but I'm open to whatever the group says with that. I just want to say that it does kind of strike a chord with me that the conversations I'm hearing this time are opposite of what I heard last time. We were looking for a superintendent. When we had someone that was local, no one wanted the person that was local. Now we want someone local or internal, which, I mean, I think there's some viable candidates here, so I'm not saying that. I can think of several right now in my head. But I just think we need to be sure of what we want, because we can't make emotional decisions or out of emotion when things don't come as we should want them to. Because last time we were upset with our local candidates, so we wanted to do something different. And we looked at business candidates. I mean, we went to an array. We didn't just stick to education. We went outside of the box. We looked at a variety of options because we were not pleased with what currently had been the case, even though they had been a local candidate. So then on the flip side of that, we saw it differently. We got differently. Okay, we are here now. Okay, so maybe the board isn't pleased with where we are now. So then we gotta figure out, I think, what that looks like. And we can't go back and forth when it's not at that moment what we wanted it to be. Because I think with anyone in any job or career, and it's different generation to generation, because I mean, my parents worked their jobs for 40 years and that's where they retired from, right? That's what they did consistently until they left, and that's just what happens. I have cousins who've maybe done it 2 or 3 times. Well, you look at my resume, I've done it a couple more than that, but I mean, I'm also the millennial, I'm into that millennial cusp. So I think it's generational things, but we can't expect people, I think, whether they're local or non-local, even in our own jobs, we can't expect our peers to stay around, our coworkers and our teammates, when there's so much going on. And I'm not speaking as to the superintendent, but just we have to look at, and I've said this several times in this process, and Joe mentioned this when he was like, why do we have to go out to look for other people in other places, for other entities? We have to figure out why in Hamilton County it is hard for us to keep good leadership, whether they're homegrown or not homegrown, because I know so many students that were in the top 10%. We go see them at superintendent's banquet. They leave, they're in the top 10% in Hamilton County. We tell them, if you go into education, you come back here, you have a job. And we tell those students that. And I can think of at least right now in my head, 20 students from the schools that I represent that went into education that have not come back to Hamilton County to do anything. And so I think we have to think about, what is it about Hamilton County that doesn't attract just local talent to stay sometimes or come back when they go to school or training or whatever? And what about Hamilton County doesn't attract even the transplant talent to stay? I mean, I think we do really, and this is not Hamilton County Schools' issue, this is a county community issue, but I really do think we need to do some soul searching as to what is causing that. I mean, are we being mean boys and girls? I mean, what's going on? You know, like the movie, I don't know, but I'm just saying we have to figure out what that looks like, because I do think that comes into play. And once we get the candidate here in Hamilton County Schools who we believe is gonna be that best candidate, and I mean, I don't know, it could be, I don't know, I thought one of my principals. I'm saying it could be Coach Robert Hyde, I don't know, he retired, but I'll use him. It could be Coach Robert Hyde, but if we get him, what are we gonna do to keep him? If he's good at what he's doing, like what are we gonna do as his board to support him and keep him? I mean, I don't know, we have to figure that out, because I think that's the bigger picture. I don't care who it is. How are we going to support them in making Hamilton County Schools the best it can be and keep them? And I just really think that's what it gets down to. But I'm open, because I got a couple of candidates locally in mind, so.
Mrs. Thurman.
Well, it looks like to me we did everything we could to the last superintendent. I can't think of anything he wanted that he didn't get, including more money, and you left anyway, so maybe the problem's not us. But anyway, so I mean, I just can't think of anything that was asked for that he didn't get. But anyway, so one thing that Tucker did say was loyalty. I think that's one thing that I'm really going to look forward to, because I think that the loyalty to these students, instead of like I said, in the education community, they're always looking for the next big thing. You know, the next big thing. That's why they leave. I don't think it really has anything to do with us. I think they have a time set in their mind. So I think the average age of a superintendent is what, 4 points?
It's 3.5 years
About
in a
3.5
large system.
Yeah. And so I don't think it's anything with us. I think that's just the nature of the beast. That's why I think someone local is the person. And I tell you, about the community input, I think the community trusts us to make this. I think I've been through how many superintendent searches. We have had meetings all over this town. We have had hooplas, and you know who was there all the time? Faculty,
That's true.
administration,
That's true.
other elected officials. We just sit around and hobnobbed, and that was about it. The very, very few parents showed up for that. They expect us to do our homework and to do the job. And as far as the former superintendent, I'm not going to let Rick be thrown under the bus. Rick did a lot of good things for this school system. He poured his heart and soul into that. He had a very unfortunate incident that had nothing to do with the education of the children in Hamilton County. And then I remember when we first did our strategic plan, some new members of the board were just, oh my God, we're finally getting a strategic plan. Well, every superintendent I've worked for, we had a strategic plan. This was nothing new. It was not a big revelation that we had a strategic plan. Every superintendent I've worked under had strategic plans. I have them all in my closet at my house. Matter of fact, when I get off the board, they're going to go in the trash, but I do have them. But a local superintendent did do a lot of good things for this community. And just that one bad incident that he absolutely had nothing to do with, was not handled well. But that had absolutely nothing to do with his ability to be a superintendent. So I'm not going to say just because all of us know what happened there, and any more than we can blame another superintendent for any other thing that's happened tragically in this school system. We cannot blame the superintendent for everything that happens. They may be ultimately the person who has the answer for it, but we can't blame them for it. Just like if things happen on this school board, you know, people look at me and blame me for a lot of things maybe that I didn't even vote for, and I said, well, it's the board, we get blamed for it because that's our job. But here again, I will say that I do not know why we just can't say, why do we have to spend any money to do this? If we just can't talk and say, like I say, why do we have to interview these people and dig down and ask them? Nobody knows our strategic plan like the people in the system now.
Right.
If we're going to bring somebody from out of town and bring them up to snuff on what our strategic plan is, the people over here in this office ought to know that strategic plan frontwards and backwards. So bringing somebody in from out of town, first, they may come in and want to do a different strategic plan. They may want to just completely reverse some of the things that have been done. We don't know. But if you want to keep on the trajectory that you say that you really appreciate, I think the people that helped put that strategic plan together ought to be one of the ones to carry it on. And like I said, loyalty to this school system means a lot to me. I just don't want somebody doing something to flash in the pan. And I remember, and again, I will go back. One of the things that we did here in Hamilton County, good, bad, or whatever, there was a couple of things that one of the superintendents when I first got on the board did. He did a couple of things that really looked good, you know, in the eyes of the world. Oh, look at all this innovative stuff he's done. Oh, but when he left and left us with some of his innovation, it was not a good thing. The new math, I will say, for one. I mean, that was innovative, that was creative, that was wonderful, that's new, and we found out now, years later, when the bottom fell out of our math scores, that was not a good thing. So just because something's new and innovative doesn't make it good, any better than what we've had before. And also, another one that was brought up during that time was magnet school transportation. We were the only school system in America that would agree to that, to get a magnet school grant. Now we have it, and it's cost us millions and millions and millions of dollars. We were going to do it just for that year of the grant, and then we continued, and it still continues to this day, 22 years later. We're still doing that, and we were supposed to have stopped, and it didn't stop. So that was another thing we were left with when the superintendent left. So you know, there's a lot of things. Just because it's new and looks great and it's really groovy and all this stuff, that doesn't mean it's better for the children. I'm looking at, is it benefiting the students? I think all this hoopla, we forget about the students. We want it to all look pretty and sound pretty, and we want to all be sure that we're doing all the right things and say the right things, but when you double down on it, it's the students. that matter, who's gonna be loyal to our students, who's gonna not want to, and also another thing that has happened in years past that we've been a part of, we've seen some superintendents, not necessarily in Hamilton County Schools, but in other school districts close to us, that, things may look good on paper, and then you find out there may be a little bit of something going on that maybe not quite like it seemed. How did these numbers get up? What did we have to do to get the numbers to where they are? Was everything exactly like it should have been? And I think sometimes those kinds of things need to be taken into consideration too. Somebody that their character, and they're not going to allow some of the tomfoolery I've seen go on in some of these schools. And so that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. And we won't know that about any other candidate except somebody local. We see how they think, what they say, how they have performed in their duties, either in the classroom, in the as a principalship, as an administrator. I just don't know how you find candidates like that by just going in and reading a resume. I just don't know, because I've seen a lot of pretty resumes from a lot of really bad people. So I just think that's something we just need to keep in mind. But as far as going around having all these meetings and bringing in all the it's real funny though. A lot of times we want community input on things that we want to have community input, but when the community wants to input on other things, we don't want it. It's always kind of funny to me. But anyway, I think that the community input thing is really just a waste of a lot of people's time and a lot of people's money. We spent thousands, in fact, Joe, you know this, we went to every district. We had huge venues. We've been to the Trade Center. We've been everywhere. And you show up and nobody shows up except administration, teachers, and staff. And that's because they have to. And so, I just don't think we need to be wasting a lot of time. In the days of COVID, when people are even afraid to get out and go anywhere, I'm just not sure anybody would show up anyway. So those are just all things I think we need to think about.
Mrs. Hill.
You're good. I'm good. Thank you.
Rhonda, I appreciate the length of your service in our school system and the depth of your knowledge about the history of our school system. I wonder, is it possible that our school system has changed significantly in the last 4 years that Brian has been here?
Some things have been better, but like I say, I'm still waiting on some of the bottom lines to come out. He's done a lot of good things. I didn't say he hadn't.
Well, the point of my question is not really about Brian, but really about our system and how we do things. Because the thing that kind of kept me up at night with Brian as our leader was I felt like he was such a strong leader and helping the teachers throughout the system and the leaders throughout the system better understand the standards, better prepare the students. The thing that kept me up at night was, what if he leaves? And frankly, the thing that helped me sleep was knowing we had Nakia. And I wish that you wanted to be superintendent. Anyway, the thing, like you said, every superintendent has had a strategic plan. I get that. But what I know is that in 2016, we only outperformed the state in 3 standards. And for 20 years, we just haven't been delivering academically prepared students into the workforce. And we know this, right? That's why we have this Focus 5. That's why we're focusing on Future Ready. And so for me, I appreciate, that's the history of where we were, but I want to be headed this direction. And so, a couple things you said, I wrote them down. Why do we have to interview people?
Why do we have to interview people?
You said, why do we have to interview them? And you said,
Did I say that?
yeah, you said it.
What
I take
people?
notes.
What people?
I think you were saying candidates. Why do we have to interview candidates when we know the candidate internally? I think is what you were
Well,
saying.
why do we have to interview people we don't even know and think we can find out just
Yeah.
from an interview anything about
Yeah,
them?
but
I mean,
so you
okay.
said, why do we have to interview
Okay.
people?
It's one of those journalistic
And-
things, you just say part of the sentence, but go ahead.
And so I would say why we would interview them, people from outside of the system, is because we have had a group of people, and I'm not belittling the people that we have at all. We may have the most fantastic candidate ever in our system. But to me, why we have to interview candidates outside of our system is to know that we've got the best for Hamilton County Schools. Because to Marco's point, it's our number one most important job. That, pass a budget, be the fiscal oversight, and pass that policy. So to me, we have to interview them because the way that it was before Brian got here is not the system that I want anymore. I want the system that we've had since 2017. And the other thing that you said that stood out to me is that community input is a huge waste of time and money. And I
don't think I quite put it like that, but I said they would not come. They have not come. That is a fact. That is not.
Rhonda, I'm just writing what you're saying,
Okay,
Rhonda.
well,
I'm just trying to respond to
Okay,
you.
okay.
Because my light's on.
Okay.
But so you said community input is a huge waste of time and money, and you were referring to the other times that you've reached out for people to come and see what's going on with the superintendent.
Can I just say one thing? It wasn't me that reached out to him. It was the search firm that set all of this up all over town.
Okay, but so in these years of academic progress, we've also invested a lot of time in getting families involved in our schools. And we regularly say that an involved parent is a key part of a child's academic success.
Amen, amen.
And so knowing that perhaps our system is different now than it was 4 years ago, and we have more parents engaged than we've ever had before, might it be different this time and have our families not become expectant of having an opportunity to provide input? So, just a thought.
Ms. Thurman.
Yes, I just would like to, the questions that I don't look at a lot of these things because I know how these scores are done, like the banner fives. I know how we got all the banner fives. I won't go into that right now. It's just like if you improve on, if you have a 40 and you improve up to 45, you've advanced. But if you were in 95 and you went down to a 90, you don't get a point. I know how that works. I've been dealing with that ever since I've been on the board. It's always given me heartburn. But what I look at is people like Joe Wingate at Chat State. How many of our students have to take remedial classes?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I look at.
Mm-hmm.
That has not gone down. That has gone up. Now, if our grades look better on paper and on a graph and it makes Hamilton County look all warm and fuzzy, that's one thing. But if we're not getting the job done to where our students cannot even go off to college without taking remedial classes at state college, because a lot of these kids that are getting these Hope scholarships, they can't even use them because they can't even get into college.
Sounds to me like we need the best superintendent we can
That's
get.
exactly right. And what I'm saying is the kids that were in high school have been there for 4 years since 2017. So we, like I say, I don't see that those numbers are going down. They're actually going up. So, like I say, I've seen enough of this in the last 17 years, these graphs and things. I've seen them. I know how some of these things are figured. I know how some of these numbers can be manipulated in some cases. And so, like I say, I just want a superintendent that's going to do the best thing for the students of this county. I don't get all impressed with flowery brochures and all that kind of thing. I want to see what you've done. I want to know what you've done. I want to know how you've done it. And you cannot know that about somebody else, someone from somewhere else. I know there was a principal hired this last year. Some principals hired just strictly off of Zoom, and some of them didn't work out as well as we thought they were going to, which is very troubling to me. So, I just think it has to be somebody you know, somebody that you can talk to, somebody that you've actually sat down with, and you see what they do. And we only get that with a local candidate. You can't get that with someone from out of town.
Mr. Perez.
So, like, I don't know what our goal is today. You know, we all will have strong opinions about the type of superintendent, where we want them from, how we want them, and so on and so forth. That'll be the case. To me, if I had a thought about my goal for today, it's basically, how are we gonna enter this process? And are we gonna need to put out an RFP, whether it's for TSBA or whether it's some national firm that can come, whether it's limited so that they can do some of the administrative stuff in the background, or whether it's, you know, in-depth so that they can interview everybody that needs to be interviewed in the process, whoever that may be. But I think, in all honesty, and I think all these conversations are gonna happen a lot right now, and we're gonna have them over and over. We'll have them with even our constituents. So I think they're all good. I'm not knocking that. But I think we gotta start the process going, right?
Amen.
Whatever that process
That's
is.
right. That's right.
We gotta
Okay.
start it going.
That's right.
And so for me, where I was saying, I mean, I mentioned last time, I think I have my preferences, but I might be, this whole process might change I don't know, right? For me, I think there's a lot of heavy lifting that if we have to wait to get together, to set another special session, to do things, because everything we do, and I hope the public knows, there isn't any back channeling of anything here, and I know that's true of us. I know that's very real. We have to do everything publicly. We have to call a session. We have to come together. We have to look at, and this process will be extended forever if all of that is on us. I also want to say to some of the suggestions, I personally, one voice on this board, would prefer to separate our staff and our team from a lot of this, because I think it creates for them a terrible conflict where they're choosing for the whole county, even the questions to a survey that might go out, right? That might, so I personally don't think that would be wise to use our own team. Not that I doubt their capacity in any way, but let them keep hiring teachers if we need more teachers. Let them deal with HR situations that come up and rise. Let them deal with, you know, schools that have maintenance issues that suddenly come up, and let's separate them. We'll interview them. I do think, for instance, that if there's an internal candidate, we will want to know what people say, but I also think probably not publicly. Like, we'll want a search firm to go and find out and interview people around them. I agree with, I often say a resume can only guarantee that you're going to hire a good resume writer. And an interview process, to me, only guarantees that you hire somebody that knows how to interview well.
Right.
None of that actually guarantees that you hire people who are good at the job. And that's what we want. We want good leaders. So for me, what I'd love to see today is direction on hey, this is what I signed up for. I wasn't expecting this actually probably ever in my first term, but it happened. And I realized that it may mean I may have to come a lot of evenings and prepare a lot of time, and that will be what's needed. But I'd love direction from us as to what the next steps, and we'll have these discussions, whether it's 1 month or 13 months, I hope not, which you said, but we'll have these discussions many times as to where each of us believes the superintendent. So I think, whether limited or extended, somebody has to do the heavy lifting, and it's not going to be us. We're not going to be able to dedicate, objective time to be able to get it done.
Mr. Walker.
I don't know how Marco feels, but I just got appointed yesterday, so I didn't expect any of this as well. But just for clarity.
I'm glad that
Thank you for laughing.
I'm now the senior, I'm the senior board member here.
But just for clarity, and not to pick, what I heard my counterpart say was that we didn't need to pay to interview people, not that we didn't need to interview people. That's the way I received that, so I just wanted to clear that up.
I listen to every word everybody here says.
I appreciate that. That's what I was saying. And I know Rhonda doesn't need to defend her, but that's the way I heard
No.
that come out.
Well, I
So,
wrote it down as she's saying.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, well, great discussion, Marco's right. The discussion will continue, but we're kind of stuck in mud here. So if we introduce RFP, send it out, and we get back responses, that don't mean we have to accept it.
Absolutely correct.
Right? Number one. And if we check with TSBA to see exactly what they would offer to us, I mean, that's got to be the first step. May sound silly, but I'm kind of from Missouri, the show me state. And I think what's being referred to, and you just said it, a good-looking resume don't necessarily mean a good person, or a good-looking interview don't necessarily mean. But we've got some people right under our nose that they've showed us what they can do. And so, but let's do something. I mean, we're doing a lot of discussion and kind of getting run in place here. We need to send out some RFPs. Let's do it. Talk with TSBA, let's do it. But let's move forward.
I've got a couple suggestions here in just a second. Mr. McClendon?
Just real quick, Mr. Bennett, do we have to do an RFP?
No, I mean, the board could, because it's a professional service, the board could either send out its current RFP again and see who responds. So you could do that right now. You could contract with TSBA.
Do we know what they charge for a
It
service?
depends on the detail of the search. So a relatively basic search with no community fora is something around, is it $6,000? Is it $5 or $6,000? If they do the community forum and really intensive stuff, it's between 10 and 12. Yeah, so I think that was their proposal last time, and in my experience, that's what they have done recently for other counties. So you could go ahead and ask them to jump on board right now. You could, really, it's what does the board want to do? What I've heard a number of board members say is you don't have the bandwidth to do it yourselves. So if you don't want to wait another month for responses to an RFP, my suggestion would be you either reach out to TSBA and have them do this. You reach out to Mr. Carrick, with whom the board has a prior relationship, and have them do this, have him do this, or you get somebody from the outside, maybe Mr. Carrick, to vet an internal candidate if that's the way this board wants to go. But those, your creativity is the boundary. But to give y'all some options, I think what you're saying here about just retaining TSBA or somebody else right now saves you a month.
I did speak. They have service plan 1, which is $6,500, and plan 2, which is $11,500.
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, were you good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, going back to what Mr. Bennett said, if you'll look there at number 2 on the first page, and I actually didn't realize that we operated this quickly last time, if this is accurate, but, so, the timeline last time was we posted an RFP and a week later, we expected responses. Is that correct?
That's right.
So, I mean, in theory, we could go ahead and put out an RFP and say, hey, a week from now, we want to know who has interest in partnering with us, and TSBA is going to respond to that. I mean, they, from my experience, they respond and are involved at some level on every superintendent search that's going on around the state. So, I mean, I'd be shocked if they didn't respond to that, and they obviously already know we've got an opening, or we'll have an opening. So, my suggestion would be that we just go ahead and do that and send that out and see who responds. And then we're going to get all comers on that, right? I mean, as opposed to maybe picking and choosing who we might want to talk to, and just see who wants to send that in. And I'll quickly say that, you know, I was one last time that thought we had to cast a large net, and because as a parent at the time and as somebody outside the system looking in for multiple years, I saw a system that was severely underperforming. And to be honest, at that time, we only had one local candidate. And the bottom line for me was, not that I did not care for that candidate, because I had known that candidate for a long time. I reverted back to just my experience in the profession of athletics. It never happens that an assistant coach on a losing team gets the head job, you know? It just doesn't work that way. I mean, even if you're a phenomenal special teams coordinator, you're not going to get the job if you went 2-8. Just doesn't work that way. Usually an assistant rolls into a head job because it's going really well and they want to keep it going. And so I was more in the camp of casting a wide net. I wanted to see who was out there. I wanted to see not just educators, but I wanted to get into the business world and higher ed, anywhere we had to go to find somebody that could help us get the arrow going in a different direction. I feel like now that this is a more desirable place to be than it was at that point. And it's just my opinion. I think that we will have some folks, will have more interest. I'd be shocked if we didn't have more interest this go around than what we had last time. So my suggestion would be that we go ahead and try to send out an RFP, and we can squeeze it down. We can say, hey, a week from now, I mean, we get ready to have our board meeting next Thursday night. You know, we could have those things. I don't know they'd be ready for review that quickly, but at least we'd have them in, and those could be disseminated to the board members for review. Because the reality is, you all know this, I mean, the ones that were around last time, I mean, we're going to be meeting. So this isn't the last special called session we're going to have to be able to get together and do the business of finding a superintendent. So anyway, that would be my suggestion. But I am open to whatever you all would like to do. Again, that is kind of where I was hoping we would get tonight, would be to at least get to that point, so that the next step for us would be getting about the search.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If I may suggest, if it is the will of the board to follow the chair's lead on this, may I suggest that in the interest of time, that the board authorize you and me to clean up this current RFQ, to update it so that the timeline is updated and we actually fix some of the things that are in here.
Okay.
But then once assuming that this RFQ meets the board's approval right now, we update it to include who the immediate past superintendent is, update our data and such, and again, assuming that this is the direction the board wants to go, that you and I have the latitude to edit this, and then we get it out, if we can, tomorrow.
Would we have the ability, just help me remember, because I don't know that we've done this before, but if we chose to do this, would we have the ability at Monday's agenda session to vote, or do we have to completely rename that, and would that be another special called session if we were going to vote to, or not, I'm sorry, yeah, to vote to send out an RFP after board members have had time to look it over?
We could do that. We'd have to add it to a special called session, and if I might ask if we could do it after the agenda session, because I'm moving my daughter into college Monday, and I'm going to be breaking speed limits and 9:59 to get back here in time already.
Okay, but you're saying that is a possibility.
So we could update this tomorrow, Mr. Chairman. I'll get it to you and to the board, if this is what the board wants to do.
Right.
But I'll update this tomorrow, get it to you before close of business. I'll do it. And if it's the pleasure of the board can
Get married to do it.
can approve it at a special call meeting on Monday, if that's the pleasure of the board.
Do we
Okay.
need a motion for that?
If that's what we would choose to do,
Yeah.
yes, sir, we would.
So I move that we empower both you as chairman and Mr. Bennett to review the current RFP and prepare it for future. I would have been fine that with your review you send it out, but if you'd prefer that we vote on it, then for us to review by Monday and vote on it. So
Okay.
we don't have to accept an RFP, so it's
Right.
something we think.
Right. Do we got a motion on the floor? I'll let you discuss here in just a second. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Did you get that, Mrs. Ford? Okay, Mr. McClendon.
And I'm fine with that. Like I said, I think expediting it is the way to go. The only thing I do have kind of concern on, and this is something you will clean up, but I think it probably, I don't know when we discuss this as a board, but this RFP says basically that when y'all did this, the candidate would begin their term on July 1st of 2017. And I think that's probably an important end to this. The board probably has to have input on is like, when is our deadline? Like, is it January 1st or is it January 3rd? You know, what is that kind of timeline? That's just kind of the only thing I see probably begs for greater conversation from the board.
Do you think, Mr. Bennett, maybe that you could consult with a couple folks that do this and just see what a reasonable timeline? I mean, I know that everyone here wants to get a leader as reasonably soon as possible. In my perfect world was, you know, by the end of our fall semester, we have someone. If we can get someone, I mean, I don't know how fast it could actually happen, but I mean, that was in my perfect world. Worst case scenario, we hopefully found a leader, but you know, I don't operate in that world, so I don't know how.
So anyone that I would consult with on this is probably going to be wanting to make have a bid. So I'm going to fall back on my experience in this, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, because I mean, I know of 3 organizations I've talked to who could probably have something here to us Monday. So I think what we have here is not later than July 1. I think if what you find early is there's a qualified internal candidate, it's going to be easier to drop into a slot sooner. Alternatively, if there's a qualified external candidate who is not currently in a position, he could drop into a slot sooner. If you have someone who is working in another district right now, he or she may be under contract and couldn't leave. So I think not later than the start of the next fiscal year makes some sense with an eye toward we want to do it sooner if we can. I will try to leverage the language to address what we need. And folks that take no pride in authorship, if you have any questions or thoughts, let me know and I'll be happy to change it.
And finally, just as a
Mr.
thought to add to this, I don't have a problem personally if we vote on the RFP on Thursday, giving you time to do a good job with this, and then call a special session the following week to vote on the RFPs that we have. I mean, again, I'm assuming, and I don't want to, we all are busy, so I understand that not everyone may be able to do that, but I'm assuming we're going to be meeting a lot over the next few months. So if that helps, let's not rush an RFP out the door either. Like, let's make sure we get everything right. So,
Mr. Walker.
Yes, sir. Tucker brought up earlier, you know, and I didn't verbalize it the same way, but we talked about the opportunity to look from within inside, and then this be that next piece. I don't want to get them confused. If we were to go inside, if we just put, you know, here's the application on the old bulletin board, and we found someone inside, then, or we didn't find someone inside, then my understanding is that that's when we would put this in motion. I'm talking, you know, timelines, and I had a different kind of thought process of how soon we could get somebody in place, and don't want to rush it because we want quality, we want the right candidate, but so if we say we want to put this out, is there a time that while we're vetting this, is there a time that we can start interviewing internal candidates? And then we have this as our plan over here. Okay, we weren't all in agreement on who we found internally. Then we roll this out and have somebody go out there. Obviously, they can write it up and we can accept it or not, but I think in my mindset is we interview internally, whatever that time frame is, and then this is our backup plan to put out in the world to look for someone else.
I think absolutely we can do that. I think that's something that we can discuss, because again, we don't have to accept anything, but we can go ahead and get a feel for who would have interest in partnering with us. And if they have interest in partnering, they're not going to say no because we say, hey, we want 30 days here to whatever an internal process might look like. You know what I mean? So. All right, any other discussion around that or question?
Just for
Ms.
clarity,
Thurman.
just for clarity, Joe. So, if we get this RFP back, like I say, we can, that was, with James, I was gonna ask that same question, about the internal candidates, excuse me, when we were going to interview them without going externally. So, if we get the RFP back, we will say, we want how many ever days to see if anyone internally is interested and send out, what
Well,
does
so-
that process look like?
Yeah, so I think that's something we probably need to talk to Mr. Bennett about, because if you, I'm open to whatever, I'm just trying to think out loud, what does
Yeah.
that look like? So, if you've
Right.
got, let's say you got multiple internal candidates, and you want to see them first in an interview, do you make a decision at that point before you ever get to, who's shown interest in partnering with you, or do you use that time to go, I'm gonna eliminate some in my mind right here off the bat, or there's one that I like that can kind of confirm to me I really do like them, and then does that slide into the process of seeing some other candidates? I don't know what that looks like, because again, I'm just thinking out loud, let's say you got 3 internal candidates, and maybe there's some folks that really like them, but maybe they don't get a majority of vote just in that internal process. Well, do they become a part of the larger process or not after that? So, I don't know, that's a good question. I think it's something we can talk through and think about, and have this in motion to go ahead and figure out who would want to partner with us and what's that look like. What's it look like from a cost standpoint? What's it look like from their ability? What can they do for us with whatever they're asking?
Even with internal.
Well, what is the timeline if you're gonna, at what point do you put it out for the internal candidates, I guess is what are we gonna have to wait for the RFP if we're not even, to see whether we even need the RFP? I guess I just don't understand.
Well, for me, this right here is just about just gauging
Getting
interest.
started, okay.
Just gauging interest, that's all it is. And then, like I said, we're gonna meet again, so then we're gonna have to figure out, okay, now what's the process look like? We figured out who would have interest in helping us do this. Is that a direction we wanna go or not? So, were you gonna say something, Mr.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So, one of the things that every search firm that we talked to back in 2017 said was, or 16 said, was that you either have a search or you don't have a search. So if you have a search, then internal candidates can apply alongside everybody else who's applying. Everyone also said shades of, if you have a qualified internal candidate you're looking at and you want to give them preference, that's not a search. That's a posting. You just post it and you talk to them, and there are various ways you can vet their qualifications, but as I recall, everyone we talked to said, if you're going to do a search, put your internal candidates into that hopper, or look at them on the front end and then do a search. So it's like,
Post the job and then do it.
yeah, I mean,
Have somebody
and I
do
think
it.
that's actually something that TSBA gives advice to its members on. If you've got a qualified internal candidate, you don't need a search.
Right.
If you want a search, internal candidates can apply, but having this two-step approach of, we're going to look at an internal candidate and give them preference over external candidates isn't really a genuine search. And what ends up happening is, if someone ends up getting the position, the question becomes, what was the criteria you used for giving it to them? Either post internally or do a true search. And you can do a true search and have internal candidates. No one said otherwise back in 16. So anyway, I hear what you're saying. I want to be sure the board is clear on what it's saying. You either want to do a true search, or you just want to post it, rather than being kind of half pregnant.
You are, you ain't.
Go ahead, Mr. McClendon.
So trying to wrap my head around this, and I don't know if we can do, getting complicated here, but do 2 RFPs, because, and just important to me is maybe an RFP saying, hey, will you vet internal candidates? And I know we've said we don't really need to do that, but we also don't need to put our central office staff in the process of vetting their own, or their future boss. And
I may have misspoken, and
Yeah.
if I did, let me fix that right now, so you're clear on what I mean. I think you do an RFP for a true search, or you figure out who can help you vet an internal posting.
Okay, gotcha.
But because I agree with something that somebody said, I don't know who said it, and I have the highest professional regard for Ms. Murray and her staff. They are some of the best professionals I've dealt with in 30 years. But you put them in a very difficult position to have to vet an internal candidate. And frankly, they're this time of year with COVID, they don't have the bandwidth. So I think I agree with something that Marco said earlier, Mr. Perez said earlier. If you you probably need somebody who can quarterback even a posting and vet your candidates. So from what I'm hearing y'all say, it's either an internal posting with someone who vets it, or it's a true search. So I kind of agree with what Mr. McClendon is saying. What you're talking about is 2 separate things.
Well, let me ask you this. So you put out an RFP, and those folks respond to whatever's put together. Mr. Bennett, you don't think they would have interest in partnering with us even in a vetting process?
So I think they could.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't think we have to split hairs. I think you just say who wants to partner with us in this search. We haven't guaranteed them any certain amount of work, correct?
So what I could do is I could put in the RFP that the board may that responders should submit 2 proposals. One is a comprehensive search, and the other is how they would handle an internal vetting.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Does that make sense?
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, discussion on this? I think we've got a motion and a second.
Okay, do we have to change the motion to fit what you just said, or?
I was very general in my.
He was. He said RFP, and so what I'll do is my RFP, and I'll talk with the chairman about this, but it will have 2 options. Respondents must have a proposal for a comprehensive search and an alternative proposal for vetting internal candidates.
And the
And I-
special call meeting is gonna be Monday. Is that correct?
We have an
Yes, and I will
agenda
get this to you before close of business tomorrow.
but it-
It's gonna be before the meeting or after? It's going to be after the meeting for me, because I can't be here any earlier.
He wanted after
After,
the
yeah,
agenda
it can't
session.
be earlier than
So-
And please don't speed, Mr. Bennett. Please get here.
Mr. Walker.
You know, we've talked about quality and everything, and again, some timeframes. Do we have to rush that piece that quick?
I don't
You
think
know,
we
I
did.
think we need to take our breath. It doesn't need to be 2 months from now, but I think everything that we're talking about,
Well-
let's, you know,
What part are you talking about, Rush?
the actual getting the RFP back to us. If I'm hearing it correctly, we want to put something together that you guys want to present to us,
Mhm.
and then we'll say, yes, it's okay, we put that out. That's what you're talking about doing.
That's right.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah, that's all right. Just that
Okay.
you say,
This
that
looks
what
good.
we've discussed here tonight is
Gotcha.
accurately reflected in the document, and then we just put it out.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, no, not about you making a choice on.
Right, yeah, not sending it out and making the, yes, okay, thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, Mrs. Ford?
Mrs. Hill,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. McClendon?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Sermon?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Wingate?
Yes. All right. Thank you all for tonight. We are on our way, so, Mr. Bennett, we'll be talking tomorrow.
We will.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Chairman, we request tonight, please.
Sure, I'll be happy to speak with you outside.
No, we've got a whole group.
Meeting's been adjourned.
I appreciate that. Well, I just don't, for those of us that were through that, that was much more.